The last remnants of Earth's defense fleet hung in Mars orbit like broken toys, their hulls scarred by plasma fire and kinetic impacts. Ensign James Torres stared at his sensor display aboard the EF's deterrent, watching as more Concordat ships emerged from FTL. His hands trembled as he counted the signatures. 30, no, 40 new hostiles joining the already overwhelming alien force. Multiple signatures detected, Admiral, he reported, his voice cracking. Heavy carriers, at least 3 dreadnoughts. They're forming an attack pattern. Admiral Helena Reeves stood at the bridge's viewport, her weathered face illuminated by the red glow of Mars below. 27 years in space combat, and this would be her last stand. The Concordat had pushed humanity back from every colony, every outpost, until only Mars and Earth remained. Their technological superiority had made a mockery of humanity's best defenses. Status of the civilian evacuation, she demanded, never taking her eyes off the gathering storm of alien ships. 70% complete. Admiral, we need another 20 minutes to get the last transports clear. 20 minutes they didn't have. The Concordat's sleek, crystalline ships moved with perfect coordination, their organic-looking designs a stark contrast to the utilitarian human vessels. They'd learned the hard way that those beautiful ships carried weapons that could slice through Earth's strongest armor like paper. All ships, defensive formation Delta, Reeves ordered. We hold this line. Earth depends on us. Torres watched as the remaining 12 Earth ships moved into position. They were a ragtag group, 3 cruisers, 5 destroyers, and 4 frigates. Most had damage from previous battles, their crews exhausted from weeks of constant combat. The first shots came from the Concordat's forward elements, streams of quantum-charged particles that distorted space itself. 2 human frigates disappeared in silent flashes of light, their atoms scattered across space. The rest of the fleet returned fire, rail guns accelerating tungsten rounds to relativistic speeds, while missile salvos sought gaps in alien shields. Admiral, Torres called out, his eyes fixed on an anomalous reading. I'm kidding. This can't be right. There's an energy signature forming at coordinates 227 Mark 43. It's like nothing I've ever. Space folded. That was the only way Torres could describe it. A point of absolute darkness appeared, surrounded by ribbons of blue-white energy that spiral outward like lightning frozen in time. The sensor readings went haywire, showing power levels that should have been impossible. Match that signature against historical records, Reeves ordered, a strange tone in her voice. Hope. Fear. Torres's fingers flew across his console. Match found. It's... Admiral, this can't be. It matches the EF's Hyperion. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew the story. Humanity's first true flagship, lost 3 decades ago during the pioneer days of FTL testing. The pride of the fleet, carrying the best and brightest Earth had to offer, vanished without a trace. From the spatial distortion emerged a ship that defied description. At its core was clearly the Hyperion's original hull, but it was transformed. Crystalline structures that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions grew from its surface. Its movement left ghost images across space, like multiple versions of the same ship occupying slightly different positions. The Concordat fleet reacted immediately, turning their weapons on this new arrival. Torres watched in awe as their attacks passed harmlessly through the vessel's quantum echoes. The Hyperion's response was devastating. Beams of pure white light reached out, touching alien ships. Where they struck, reality seemed to skip like a scratched record. Ships simply ceased to exist, or aged thousands of years in seconds, crumbling to dust. On the main display, a transmission request flashed. The source, EF's Hyperion. The image that appeared showed a bridge unlike anything in Earth's fleet. Strange geometric patterns flowed across organic-looking surfaces, and the crew moved with an unsettling grace, as if partially out of phase with normal space. In the command chair sat a woman with sharp features and penetrating eyes that seemed to see through time itself. Captain Alexandra Lex Mitchell, unchanged since the day she disappeared 30 years ago. "Earth Command," she said, her voice carrying echoes of futures yet to come. "The Hyperion has returned, and we have so much to show you." The emergency briefing room aboard Mars Command was packed with Earth's highest-ranking military officials, their faces a mix of awe and suspicion as they watched Captain Mitchell's demonstration. She stood in the center of the room, her uniform bearing insignia that hadn't been used in decades, while ghostly images of future battles played out in the air around her. "In this timeline," she said, gesturing to a holographic battle where Earth ships fought alongside vessels of clearly alien design, "we survive. In others," she waved her hand, and the image shifted to show Earth as a lifeless husk. "We don't." Admiral Reeves leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You expect us to believe you've seen every possible future? That your ship, missing for 30 years, just happened to return at our darkest hour?" "Not happened, Admiral. Chosen." Mitchell's form flickered slightly, like a video feed with poor synchronization. Her crew, stationed around the room's perimeter, displayed the same unsettling effect. The Hyperion wasn't lost. We were selected. Defense Minister Chen slammed his fist on the table. "Selected by whom? And why do you all look like you're about to phase out of existence?" Mitchell smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Because we are, Minister. In several thousand possible timelines, this conversation ends with you ordering Marines to detain us. I should warn you, it doesn't work in any of them." As if on cue, the room's doors burst open. A full squad of Marines charged in, weapons raised. Captain Alexandra Mitchell, their commander, barked, "You and your crew are under arrest pending full investigation of your claims." Mitchell sighed, sharing a knowing look with her crew. "Now watch carefully," she said to the officials. "This is why detention won't work." The Marines opened fire, and their shots passed through empty air. Mitchell and her entire crew had become translucent, their forms rippling like heat waves over hot pavement. They walked calmly through the soldiers, through the solid walls, their voices echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "We exist in multiple states simultaneously," Mitchell's voice explained. "The precursors taught us how to step halfway out of time itself, but we don't have time for experiments or interrogations." Her crew reappeared around the room's central holodeble, their forms solidifying. The table's display came to life, showing a massive Concordat vessel unlike any seen before. "This is why we revealed ourselves now," Mitchell continued. "The Concordat's Star Killer. In most timelines, they wait another month to deploy it. But our arrival has scared them. They're moving up their timetable." The hologram showed the massive weapon charging, its crystalline spires focusing energy directly at Sol. Simulated predictions played out. Earth's sun destabilizing, going nova, the entire system reduced to atomic ash. "Impossible," Chen whispered. "Our intelligence showed they were years away from completing that weapon." "They had help." Mitchell's first officer, Commander David Rivera, spoke up. His quantum echo left trails of afterimages as he moved. "The same race that uplifted us during our absence has a complicated history with the Concordat. We weren't their first chosen pupils." Alarms blared throughout the base. A junior officer burst into the room, face pale. Multiple Concordat capital ships just emerged from FTL. They're forming up around Deimos. The holodeble updated in real time, showing the alien fleet assembling around Mars's smaller moon. At their center, the Star Killer's massive form began to unfold like a deadly flower preparing to bloom. 27 minutes, Mitchell announced, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. "That's how long until they fire. In 83% of possible timelines, they succeed." She turned to address the room's stunned occupants. "But we've seen the paths where we win. The Hyperion can stop them, but we need your fleet's help. And we need it now." Admiral Reeves stood, her expression hardened by decades of command decisions. The choice seems simple enough. Trust a ghost ship and her quantum-shifted crew, or watch Earth burn. She faced Mitchell directly. But understand this, Captain, if you're lying, if this is some Concordat trick, I'll find a way to make you stay in one timeline long enough to pay for it. Mitchell's smile turned genuine. Admiral, in every timeline where we succeed, you say exactly that. The Hyperion's bridge resembled a living organism more than a starship command center. Crystalline growths pulsed with internal light, their surfaces displaying cascading streams of data in languages no human had written. Admiral Reeves stood beside Captain Mitchell, watching as reality itself seemed to ripple around the transformed crew. "It's time you knew the truth," Mitchell said, placing her hand on a crystalline interface. "Everyone ready?" Her crew nodded, their movements leaving quantum echoes in the air. Commander Rivera initiated what they called the Mind Meld Protocol, a technology far beyond anything humanity had dreamed possible. The bridge disappeared. They stood in what seemed to be an infinite library, its architecture defying Euclidean geometry. Massive structures of crystal and light stretched in impossible directions, each containing what looked like frozen moments of time. "This is where we spent our subjective centuries," Mitchell's voice echoed. The precursors didn't just disappear. They transcended normal spacetime, but they left behind teachers. A figure materialized, a shifting mass of crystalline geometric patterns that somehow conveyed intelligence. Admiral Reeves instinctively knew she was looking at a precursor eye, its very existence challenging her understanding of reality. "Your vessel showed promise." The AI's thoughts resonated directly in their minds. The way your crew adapted to the initial FTL accident, it suggested humanity might be ready for elevation. The scene changed. They watched as the Hyperion of 30 years ago tumbled through a temporal storm. But instead of being destroyed, the ship was caught, examined, tested. The crew, rather than panicking, worked together to stabilize their position. "We were pulled into what they called the Library of Eternity," Mitchell explained. "Time flows differently there. We spent hundreds of years learning, evolving, while only decades passed in normal space. The memories flowed faster. They saw the crew learning to perceive multiple timelines, their bodies adapting to exist partially outside normal time. They witnessed the gradual transformation of the Hyperion, its hull incorporating precursor technology that operated on principles that seemed like magic. But then came a darker vision. Dr. Sarah Reynolds, the ship's chief medical officer, appeared in her lab, her expression grave. "Captain," her voice echoed through the shared memory, "the temporal exposure is changing us at a genetic level. Our DNA is evolving. I'm not sure we can be considered entirely human anymore." The mind meld shifted again, showing the crew's struggles with their transformation. Some could now see every possible version of themselves across infinite timelines. Others learned to step sideways through moments of time, their consciousness existing in multiple instances simultaneously. "We made a choice," Mitchell's voice cut through the visions. "To continue our evolution, knowing we might lose our humanity, but gain the power to save Earth." The scene returned to the Hyperion's bridge. Admiral Reeves steadied herself against a console, her mind reeling from the experience. "My God," she whispered, "you're not just time travelers. You're becoming something else entirely. We're becoming what humanity needs to survive," Commander Rivera said, his form flickering through multiple possible versions of himself. "The Concordat isn't just technologically superior. They're approaching the same evolutionary threshold, but their path leads to destruction." Mitchell nodded toward a temporal display, where possible futures branched like lightning across darkness. In most timelines, they achieve transcendence through conflict, leading to a war that tears reality apart. "We have to show them another way." "And if we can't?" Reeves asked. The answer came not from Mitchell, but from the ship itself. The crystalline growths pulsed, projecting an image of the timeline where they failed. They watched in horror as the fabric of space-time unraveled, entire star systems blinking out of existence as temporal paradoxes cascaded through the galaxy. "That's what the precursors were preparing us for," Mitchell said softly. "Not just to fight the Concordat, but to prevent them from making the same mistakes that nearly destroyed the universe eons ago." The ship's temporal sensors suddenly flared. Multiple alarm systems activated simultaneously, their warnings echoing across several timelines at once. "The Starkiller," Rivera announced, his voice carrying echoes of futures yet to come. "They're powering up earlier than any timeline predicted. They must have detected our temporal signatures." Mitchell's eyes gleamed with otherworldly knowledge as she took her command chair. "Everyone to battle stations," she ordered, her voice resonating across multiple possible futures. "It's time to show them what humanity's evolution really means." The Hyperion emerged from temporal shift like a ghost becoming solid, its quantum echoes converging as it led Earth's remaining fleet toward the Starkiller. Captain Mitchell stood at her command station, her consciousness spread across dozens of potential timelines, analyzing every possible outcome. "They'd fortified Deimos," Commander Rivera reported, his form flickering between positions. "Temporal sensors detect 23 defense platforms, all equipped with dark energy weapons. The Starkiller itself is at 78% charge." Mitchell nodded, watching as the massive weapon's crystalline spires pulsed with building energy. In most timelines, a direct assault failed, but she'd seen one path, narrow and dangerous, that led to victory. "All Earth vessels, maintain formation Delta," she ordered. "You'll see multiple versions of the Hyperion. Don't be alarmed. They're all real, just from different timelines. Focus your fire on whatever targets we designate." She pressed her hand to the ship's neural interface. The Hyperion shuddered, and suddenly there were 5 of it, each version existing in a slightly different moment of time, each commanding its own probability stream. The Concordat fleet responded immediately. Space lit up with quantum-charged particles and dark energy beams, but the Hyperion's temporal echoes were already moving, each executing a perfect attack run from a different angle. "Incredible," Admiral Reeves breathed, watching from the bridge of her flagship. The Hyperion's temporal copies flowed through enemy fire like water through stones, their weapons striking with impossible precision. Each shot hit exactly where a Concordat ship would be seconds before it arrived there. The alien fleet's formation began to break. How could they fight an enemy that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously? Their advanced targeting systems were useless against ships that occupied several moments of time at once. "Starkiller at 85%, Rivera warned. 15 minutes to full power." Mitchell directed 2 of her temporal copies to engage the defense platforms, while the others pressed forward with Earth's fleet. Victory was close. She could see it across multiple timelines. Then everything went wrong. A new signal pulsed from the Starkiller. Space itself seemed to hiccup, and suddenly the Hyperion's temporal copies snapped back together like rubber bands released from tension. The crew screamed as billions of possible futures collapsed into a single timeline. "Temporal disruption field," Rivera shouted, blood trickling from his nose as his quantum state forcibly synchronized. "They've developed countermeasures." The Concordat fleet pressed their advantage. Dark energy beams sliced through space, no longer confused by temporal duplicates. 2 Earth cruisers vanished in silent explosions, while a third spun away, its hull breached. Mitchell gripped her console as the Hyperion shuddered under direct hits. The ship's quantum crystalline armor held, but she could feel its pain across multiple dimensions. "Status," she demanded. "Temporal drive is offline," Rivera reported. "The disruption field is forcing us to stay in a single timeline. We're trapped in the now, Captain." Through the viewport, Mitchell watched the Starkiller's spires align with deadly purpose. In this one, brutally linear timeline, she could see their situation clearly. No temporal tricks. No quantum duplicates. Just one ship, in one moment, facing overwhelming odds. "Captain," Dr. Reynolds called from medical. The temporal compression is affecting the crew. Our evolved genetics. They're fighting against the disruption field. We need to drop quantum shields or we risk molecular destabilization. Mitchell closed her eyes, feeling the weight of singular time pressing down on her consciousness. For years, she'd seen every possible future. Now, forced into one timeline, she felt blind. But maybe that was the point. All Earth vessels, fall back to maximum weapons range, she ordered. Then, to her crew, drop quantum shields. Divert all power to conventional drives and weapons. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Let's show them how humanity fought before we learned to bend time. The Hyperion's crystalline structures dimmed as its quantum field collapsed. But its standard weapons came alive, rail guns extending from recessed ports, while missile tubes cycled to full readiness. The Concordat thinks they've neutralized our advantage, Mitchell announced to her crew. But they've forgotten something important. Humanity doesn't need temporal powers to be dangerous. Sometimes the oldest solutions work best. She brought the Hyperion about, its conventional engines flaring. All hands, she called, her voice carrying the strength of a captain who had seen every possible future and chosen the hardest path, battle stations. Without its temporal powers, the Hyperion moved like a predator stripped to its base instincts. Mitchell had forgotten the raw thrill of conventional combat, the pure adrenaline rush of existing in just one moment, where every decision could mean life or death. Dark energy signatures powering up, Rivera called out. They're charging something massive. The Concordat fleet split apart, revealing new weapons emerging from their capital ships. Reality warped around them as dozens of dark energy beams converged, forming a web of destructive power. Evasive pattern Sierra, Mitchell ordered. Tactical, target their emitter nodes with kinetic strikes. Time it with the energy pulses. The Hyperion's railguns roared silently in space, accelerating tungsten rounds to relativistic speeds. Without temporal sight, Mitchell relied on pure instinct and decades of combat experience. The first volley struck true, shattering 3 of the Concordat's dark energy projectors. But the aliens had adapted their tactics. Their remaining beams lanced out, not at the ships, but at empty space around them. Where the energy struck, reality itself began to unravel. They're creating dead zones, Dr. Reynolds' voice crackled over the comm. Areas where matter simply ceases to exist. They're trying to box us in. Mitchell watched as chunks of Deimos vanish, erased from existence by the dark energy web. The Starkiller pulsed ominously, now at 90% charge. They had minutes at most. Admiral Reeves, Mitchell called to the Earth fleet. We need to synchronize our attack. When I give the signal, all ships fire everything they have at these coordinates. She transmitted the targeting data, knowing it was their last chance. The Hyperion dove through the shrinking safe zones between reality-eating void spaces, its conventional shields straining against the dark energy radiation. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently. Warning klaxons blared. Direct hit to engineering, Rivera reported. Quantum core is destabilizing. The disruption field is affecting our precursor tech in ways we didn't predict. Mitchell felt it too. A burning sensation in her evolved DNA, as if every cell in her body was trying to exist in multiple states at once, while being forced into linear time. Around her, the crew showed signs of the same distress. Through the pain, she noticed something odd about the dark energy patterns. Enhancement, she ordered the ship's sensors. Show me the void spaces in infrared. The display shifted, revealing an impossible pattern. The areas of erased reality weren't random. They were forming a massive temporal lens, focusing chronometric energy toward. It's a trap, Mitchell realized. They're not just trying to destroy us. They're using the Starkiller and these void spaces to create a temporal cascade. If they succeed, the entire solar system will be thrown out of sync with normal spacetime. Dr. Reynolds finished, her voice grim. Earth won't be destroyed. It will never have existed at all. Mitchell's mind raced. Without their temporal abilities, they couldn't counter such a massive chronometric attack. Unless, "Doctor," she called, "what happens if we overload our quantum core? Not to destroy it, but to create a temporal bubble." In this radiation, Reynolds calculated quickly, it would be unstable, probably collapse within minutes, but the resonance might disrupt their temporal lens. "Commander Rivera, plot a course through that debris field," Mitchell ordered, indicating a dense cluster of destroyed ships and station fragments. "Get us as close to the Star Killer as possible." "Captain," Rivera warned, "without quantum shields, that debris will tear us apart." Mitchell's eyes gleamed with the last traces of her temporal sight. "No, it won't, because we're going to do something they'll never expect." She opened a channel to the Earth fleet. "All ships, prepare to execute attack pattern Omega on my mark. And Admiral, whatever happens next, don't stop firing until either we're dead or they are." "What exactly are you planning, Captain?" Reeves demanded. Mitchell watched the approaching field of debris and void spaces, a smile playing at her lips. "We're going to remind them why humanity was chosen for elevation in the first place. Sometimes the best way forward is to go backward." She turned to her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes. All hands braced for temporal reversion. "We're about to do something incredibly stupid." The Hyperion's quantum core pulsed with unstable energy as Mitchell executed her desperate plan. They dove through the debris field, using the wreckage as cover, while their overtaxed conventional shields sparked and flared. "Core temperature critical," Rivera shouted over the groaning of stressed hull plates. "Whatever you're planning, Captain, we need to do it now." Mitchell's hands flew across the neural interface. "Initiate temporal reversion. Direct all power to the quantum core." The ship shuddered as its precursor systems reactivated, fighting against the Concordat's disruption field. Space twisted around them, reality fragmenting as two opposing temporal forces collided. Then everything stopped. The debris field hung motionless. Dark energy beams froze mid-strike. The Star Killer itself stood paralyzed, its weapon spires locked in pre-firing position. "What?" Mitchell started, but her voice echoed strangely, as if coming from multiple timelines at once. A new presence filled the bridge, vast, ancient, and thoroughly alien. The crystalline growths that had become part of the Hyperion pulsed with internal light, forming into a geometric pattern that hurt the eyes to look at directly. "Assessment complete," it announced, its thoughts bypassing normal spacetime to reach them. "Species evaluation. Concordat and human. Result. Failed." Dr. Reynolds stumbled forward, her evolved genetics allowing her to move slightly in the time-locked space. You're a precursor defense system." "Correct." The geometric pattern shifted, displaying scenes from across time and space. "This is ECTR. What is CLD following the temporal war? All species advancing toward temporal manipulation are evaluated." The images showed countless civilizations throughout history, each discovering and developing temporal technology, each ending in disaster. "But you chose us," Mitchell argued. "The Hyperion was selected for elevation." "You were a controlled Eurogui," the entity stated emotionlessly. "The Concordate, experimental Europe. Both species developed along periodicted paths. Both reacted for power beyond their understanding. Both failed." Horror dawned on Mitchell's face as she understood. This whole conflict, it was orchestrated. A test. Correct. The Concordat, she chose aggression. Humanity chose defense. Both choices led to temporal warfare. Both paths end in universal collapse. The entity showed them new images, timeline after timeline where temporal combat escalated until reality itself unraveled. The time war that had nearly destroyed the universe eons ago hadn't been fought by the precursors. They had been its victims. My God, Reynolds whispered. The precursors didn't transcend. They died. These defense systems, they're not meant to guide us. They're meant to prevent another catastrophe. Correct. Grid activation commencing. Stellar system designation. Sol. Statius. Marquee for temporal exezion. Mitchell's mind raced. In the frozen moment between moments, she saw the truth. The Hyperion selection, their training, the Concordat's advancement. It had all been a sophisticated trap, designed to identify and eliminate civilizations before they could threaten space-time itself. But something didn't add up. If prevention was your goal, she said carefully, why teach us? Why show us the library of eternity? Why give us these powers at all? The entity paused. Its geometric pattern flickered. Anomalydtect, it announced. Human and QUIRY, SUGGESTs, PATTRN recognition exceeding parameters. Analyzing. Mitchell pressed her advantage. You didn't just test us. You showed us everything. The paths that failed, the civilizations that fell. You wanted us to understand. In theory, information sharing weighs minimal required or evaluation. No, Mitchell stood, her quantum evolved form allowing her to move freely in the frozen time. You showed us too much. The library contained knowledge far beyond what was needed for a simple test. Unless. She looked at her crew, seeing the same realization dawning in their eyes. Unless the test itself wasn't what you claimed. Unless you were looking for something else entirely. The geometric pattern twisted, its light pulsing faster. Woyarning. Human cognitive he. Leap approaching dangerous teoroi. Total lead. Grid activation priority we elevated. Mitchell smiled. For the first time since losing their temporal powers, she felt hope. You're not just a defense system, are you? You're something more. And I think I'd finally understand what you've really been testing us for. You're looking for someone who can break the cycle, Mitchell declared to the geometric entity. A species that can master temporal power without starting another time war. The entity's pattern fractured, splitting into multiple versions of itself. Dangerous assumption. Grid activation continuing. Wait. Mitchell turned to her crew. Everyone, share your temporal vision. Show them what we've learned. The Hyperion's crew focused their evolved abilities, projecting their combined understanding of time streams into the frozen moment. Through their shared consciousness, they showed not just what they'd seen, but what they'd understood. Look, Mitchell directed. Every species you tested approached temporal power alone. The Concordat, the ancient empires, all of them developed the technology in isolation, seeing only their own perspective. She gestured to the frozen battle around them. But we're different. We've seen every side, every possibility. We understand why they all failed. The entity pulsed, its patterns shifting faster. Expialian. Commander Rivera stepped forward, his quantum state resonating with Mitchell's. They all saw time as a weapon, a tool for domination. But we've seen it as it truly is, a shared dimension connecting all life. Dr. Reynolds joined them, adding her perspective to the temporal projection. The time war didn't start because species gained temporal power. It started because they gained it without understanding its true nature. Around them, the frozen moment began to vibrate with possibility. The entity's geometric form became more complex, approaching dimensions the human minds couldn't process. Processing anomaly, it announced. Human perspective, CUGGEST's ALTRNATIV interpretation. Mitchell pressed their advantage. Release the time lock, she said. Let us prove it. Not just to you, but to the Concordat as well. For a moment that stretched across multiple timelines, nothing happened. Then, with a sensation like reality taking a deep breath, time began to flow again, but differently. The Hyperion's temporal powers returned, stronger than before. But this time, they weren't alone. Every ship in both fleets, human and Concordat alike, found themselves linked through temporal perception. Every crew member suddenly saw through each other's eyes, experienced each other's timelines. The effect was immediate and profound. A Concordat commander witnessed his own species' extinction in a timeline where they succeeded in destroying Earth, saw how their victory led to their own doom. A human gunner felt the terror of her alien counterpart, understanding their desperate drive to evolve before their son died. "This is what you were really testing," Mitchell said softly. "Not our ability to use temporal power, but our ability to understand it. To see beyond our own limited perspective." The entity's form stabilized into a new configuration. Cooristi. Pluroevio. Use solution. Prevent time war through species elimination. Ninivu possibility detcted. Prevent time war through species unification. The Starkiller spires began to power down as Concordat ships moved out of attack positions. Through their shared temporal vision, both sides saw the futility of their conflict and the potential of working together. All species seek advancement, the entity continued. All species fear extinction. Temporal power AMPLF, highs BOT. Previous species failed DTOTRANCEND individual perspective. Mitchell nodded, understanding at last. "That's why you showed us everything in the library. Why you let us evolve. You weren't just testing our ability to use temporal power. You were testing our ability to share it," Reynolds finished. The entity's pattern shifted one final time, settling into a form that somehow conveyed approval. Grid activation Suez SPNDD. Nuhu protocol INITIA. Designaton. Unified TEM Puoreal development. Around them, reality stabilized. The void spaces sealed themselves as dark energy weapons powered down. Through their shared temporal vision, human and Concordat crews began to understand not just each other's present, but each other's possible futures. Mitchell opened a channel to all ships. "This is Captain Mitchell to all vessels. I think we just passed the real test. And now, we have a chance to do something unprecedented." She smiled, seeing the possibility of peace across countless timelines. "We have a chance to evolve together." The response came not just from the Earth fleet, but from every Concordat ship as well. A unified acknowledgement that transcended language, carried on waves of shared temporal understanding. The first step toward a very different future had been taken. The combined fleet hung in Mars orbit, their crews linked through the temporal vision that the Hyperion had shown them how to share. But Mitchell knew their work wasn't finished. The precursor defense system's geometric form still pulsed with untapped power, waiting. "Temporal co-NVDR GNC-DTECTE," it announced. "But instability remains. Final test required." Commander Rivera's quantum-enhanced senses picked up the warning first. "Captain, the temporal sharing is creating feedback loops. The more we understand each other, the more strain we put on space-time itself," Dr. Reynolds finished. "Our combined consciousness is too much for normal reality to handle." Through their shared vision, Mitchell saw the problem. Every ship, every crew member, existing across multiple timelines simultaneously, it was exactly what had triggered the time war eons ago. Understanding wasn't enough. They needed to do something more. Previous species, RECHEDTAGS point, the entity confirmed. All FAILEDTO find balance. All she shows power over stability. Mitchell stood from her command chair, her form flickering through quantum states as an idea formed. Because they tried to maintain the power, she said. They kept pushing for more control, more temporal influence. She turned to her crew. But that's not what evolution really means, is it? The Hyperion's crystalline growths pulsed in response to her realization. Through their shared consciousness, both human and Concordat crews began to understand. Sometimes, Mitchell broadcast to all ships, evolution means knowing when to let go, when to stop reaching for more power, and instead master what we already have. She placed her hand on the neural interface one last time. Hyperion, initiate quantum core overload. Specific frequency, my command. Captain, Rivera protested. That'll burn out all our temporal systems. We'll lose everything we gained. No, Mitchell smiled. We'll prove we've learned to use it wisely. The Hyperion's quantum core began to pulse, not with destruction, but with a carefully tuned resonance. Its temporal field expanded, touching each ship in both fleets. Through their shared vision, Mitchell guided them all in what needed to be done. Together, she ordered. Every ship, every crew member. We don't need to exist in multiple timelines anymore. We just need to exist in this one. Together. The response was immediate. Human and Concordat vessels aligned their systems with the Hyperion's pulse. The temporal sharing that had linked them began to shift, transforming from multiple overlapping realities into something new, a single, shared now. Space itself seemed to exhale as the strain of supporting multiple timeline connections eased. The precursor entity's geometric form stabilized, its pattern suggesting something almost like approval. Unprecedented solution, it declared. Species choosing UNFIED and OVRDIVIDEF calculating PROBABILITY of CES. The Hyperion's quantum core flared one final time. Its crystalline growths dimmed, their temporal energies draining into the carefully controlled resonance wave. Around them, reality crystallized into a single, solid timeline, one where humans and the Concordat chose to face the future as allies. Core systems offline, Rivera reported, but he was smiling. We're locked into normal space-time. Just one timeline, one present. But we remember, Reynolds added. Everything we learned, everything we saw. We keep that knowledge, even if we can't access the power anymore. Mitchell nodded, watching as the temporal sharing faded from the fleet. But something else remained, understanding. Not forced by quantum technology or temporal vision, but earned through shared experience. Evaluation complete, the precursor entity announced. Species designation, human, and coordinate. Status, PASED. Recommendation. Proceed with UNFIED development. Its geometric form began to fade. Defense grid DAKTI. ATED. Temporal restorations lifted. Future development. Authorized. As the entity vanished, Mitchell opened a channel to all ships. Through ordinary space, through normal time, she spoke to the fleet that had once been enemies. We didn't just prove we could use temporal power, she said. We proved we could give it up. Not because we had to, but because we chose to. That's what real evolution means, not gaining power, but gaining wisdom. She looked out at the combined fleet, at Mars hanging below them, at the sun that would now continue to shine. We have one timeline now, she concluded. One present, one future. And we'll face it the way we were always meant to. Together. The response came from every ship in both fleets, a single unified acknowledgement that needed no temporal powers to express their shared understanding. They had not just prevented another time war. They had found something far more valuable, a future worth sharing.